he definitely answers questions up front for everybody. So feel free to check him out.
Yes. One of the few high-ish ELO streamers to admit mistakes, and I make plenty of them as well, so stop on by if you want a more regular Joe high ELO player, because I make plenty of those mistakes, but I try to make up for it with game knowledge and, I don't know, trickiness and never surrenderingness. I think all of those are real words.
Never surrenderingness.
Fighting words.
Indeed.
That's gotta be pretty tough, playing mostly supports and then having the urge never to surrender. It's like, what are you gonna do about it?
Well, if you go with a duo queue, it's really nice because you never have to surrender. Unfortunately, I've only done that like, 10, 15 of my 300 games now, so I don't often have that. But there's a lot of times just people who are of the same mindset that they just won't give up. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The comebacks are few and far between, but when you get them, they are so very rewarding.
Yeah, that's why I've been playing duo mode recently. Not because I want to win more. I mean, of course, that's the overall goal, but because I can control the surrender mode. And
yep.
I feel that's like the biggest advantage of doing any kind of duo queue is you can control the surrender vote. So even if you have your partner playing mid and you're playing jungle, you two can pretty much carry the game. You just have to hope everyone else is behind you as you guys continuously spam no.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then you have to endure, of course, who's the duo queue that's not surrendering, and then of course you say you're not surrendering, and they're like, I started the surrender vote. And then you just disagree with them. Be like, I agree to disagree. Let's just keep playing.
Yeah.
Let's get ahead in the game.
The game is not as far behind as you thought. So, you guys, if you're watching live right now, I did restart the stream. I apologize. Everyone's voice is back to normal. As well, you may have seen that we have a new scene for XSplit, and that was made by Vesca Violet, and he's at vescaviolet.deviantart.com. He does a lot of the stuff for Beyond the Rift, and they're actually going to be going live tonight at 10 o'clock over at owned.tv/perfectrain. That's REIGN, and you can listen to them talking anything about Super Monday Night Combat. I wanted to give them a shout out because they've been really great to us in the past and now in the present. So a bunch of great guys over there. So if you haven't listened to them when they were doing their League of Legends show and you are interested in anything else, please go listen to them as they are picked up BLGgaming.com. But going in on here, I actually had Sotere on the podcast this week because I started duo queuing with DC Wasabi, and he's about 1800 ELO. And so that means I was playing anywhere between, 1500 and 1700, depending on, who the highest was in there. So, and my ELO right now is just about under 1400. So I was playing a little bit higher than what I was doing. And I was supporting all the time. And I know Sotere, he supports a lot, and he plays a lot of AD carries. And I had a bunch of questions for him. And originally I was going to have you on so I could ask you questions about the AD carries, but now that you're on the podcast, we can have a whole giant discussion about them.
Sounds awesome to me.
So I gotta go into. I want to ask you some questions coming from a 14 to 1800 ELO standpoint. Like I said before, to a 2100 ELO player. And really, I want to start this conversation off about AD carries. Is how do you feel most AD carries play at 2100 ELO? Are they aggressive? Is it a mixed bag? Do you feel that they know what they're doing? That they kind of a generic question here.
I feel like most of them know what they are doing, and it is a mixed bag as to whether they're aggressive or passive. And generally you can tell by what champion they choose. Obviously if they pick Tristana, they want to be aggressive. If they pick Ashe, they want to be passive. Of course it varies, from player to player, but not too much. You can kind of just stereotype everyone. If they are playing one of those passive champions, then they will be passive. That being said, when you get the aggressive champions like Tristana, the level of aggression varies to some small extent, and you just kind of have to work with them, go with the flow, and that's the hardest part of, obviously being bottom lane is really working with your partner, making sure you're on the same page, making sure, you know when you want to go in, when you want to be aggressive, when you want to go for the kill, and when you're just backing off. And even up there at high elo, I certainly do it, and you see other pairings do it all the time, where one portion of that pairing wants to go all in, and the other one is actually just running away for whatever reason. It doesn't always have to make sense. Sometimes the AD carry is just like, oh, well, I don't feel like we're going to clearly win this, so I don't want to fight. Sometimes the support feels the same way. So it's something you have to feel out. Sometimes before a game, people will tell you, hey, let's play really passive. So I think communication is also very key and very helpful, just so you know, hey, okay, let's just back off, let's play passive here, wait for ganks.
Yeah, do you feel like a lot of the junglers at that level gank more bottom lane than anyone else? Because it seems that anytime I play games that I feel like I'm on my own island. I know we talk about top lane a lot being their own island, but in bottom lane, I feel like I'm just on my own. There's 2 people down there versus 2 people, and ganks are nice, but I don't need them.
Yeah, it is tricky because ideally the bottom lane should be warded to a T, should be completely protected by wards in every which way, but there's a couple mistakes that supports make. If you're purple side, for instance, a lot of purple sides will ward tri-bush, and if blue side sees them, they can run down through the river. If you forget to ward the bush, there'll be in-lane ganks. I don't think they do it any more than they do with other ELOs, but they're probably more successful when they do go down there. And the other thing, particularly lately, we see a ton of really high level and good TF players, Twisted Fate that is, of course. So certainly if you're playing a passive lane down bottom, you can be like, okay, well, let's wait for Twisted Fate. Or even if there's not jungle ganks, eventually one mid or the other will decide to roam down bottom and try to pick up some kills, whether it is, eye tower diving or going through the enemy's jungler, or I mean, it doesn't even matter how they get there. At some point they will get there to pick up those kills.
Sure. That's interesting coming from I just started working in ELO, so I've been very slowly. I think my last 10 games in a row have all been wins. And so, working on my way up there and really carrying myself out, I haven't had a lot of chance to play down there, but I have been playing a lot of jungle and trying to gank for them, and that's where a lot of these questions arise, is why do I get people that, just want to play passively? And that's, my questions come from, is that the 1300 ELO mindset, or is that just the people who don't know any better?
No, I think actually as you get into higher ELO, people will be more and more passive because they're more focused on farm. I mean, that's what I found when I was kind of going up in ELO, is the farming and the creep score was a little bit lower at the lower end of ELO. I'm not certain if that's still the same nowadays, but certainly as you get higher in ELO, people just really want to farm bottom lane, and that's kind of what bottom lane is meant to do. You really want to have each of the AD carries farming as safe as possible to get their big items. They don't want the levels, they want the items, and that's kind of what the whole meta is focused around, just letting them safely farm up.
Gotcha. You see, you're answering questions that I feel like I know the answer to, but it's nice hearing it coming from somebody else to reaffirm what I already know. But moving in here, playing some more. A few nights ago, I played a Soraka bottom lane, and the guy get into the game, and the guy asked me, and the guy says, "Oh man, if I would have remembered to, I would have told you to play Nunu because I wanted that buff from his W." And I said, "Oh, sorry, guy. I'm playing Soraka. I'm just gonna spam my heal and stuff on you." He goes, "Oh well, I don't waste my mana, so I'm gonna play very passively." And I'm thinking in my head, you're not adapting to the situation though. You have a Soraka. You're playing Corki. Corki might not be the greatest pusher like a Graves or somebody is, but you can spam your mana and push them to the tower or just before it, and we can have control of the lane. I'm gonna ward it no matter what. I'm gonna keep my river warded and ping for you to get the hell out of there. I just hope you have map awareness. And coming up into a 2000 ELO mindset, do you feel more people are adaptable to what support they have?
I don't know if they really are, to be honest. I mean, because I've had that same situation where you're a Soraka and you're like, okay, you have infinite mana, use your infinite mana. But there's some champions. Corki, I mean, I think most Corkis would be really stoked to have all that extra mana, but I've been with Veins and Ashes, and of course, they might put themselves in a compromising position if they try to harass more, and so they might not want to do that. But obviously the infinite mana and the bonus of having a Soraka healer is really key to a kind of lane sustain concept, and I do feel like people miss out on opportunities in that sense, in that they really could dominate a lane, but they don't. And now with that being said, you do have the games when people click, they know exactly what they're supposed to do, and you see really high elo players, really professional AD carries. I think they're all, they know the matchups, they know how to take advantage of them, and really that's what it is in essence, is matchups down bottom, and no one really thinks about matchups bottom lane too much, but they are matchups. They're just 2v2, so it's a whole different perspective you have to have going in. It's not simply Udyr is going to counter Gangplank top or something as simple as that. It's or is Janna Ashe really going to be great against Lulu Graves, for instance, and because there's more parts in motion, it's a little bit harder to tell, but if you play enough, you should know, okay, this is how the lane should go, this is the advantage we have, this is how we're going to win the lane and force them out of CS.
Right. Yeah, there are definitely some matchups. We've talked about them last week when we were going over the armor pen / AD for bottom lane, and when to run full armor pen and when to run AD so you can last 10. These are all runes, of course. And one of the big things that I had mentioned was if you're running against like a Taric, you probably just want to sit and farm because they're going to probably play aggressive. Like a Taric Tristana, for example, is a very aggressive lane. They have a lot of burst damage, so you're better off farming than you are trying to kill either of them. Unless obviously you're a better player than they are. So I guess that's where a lot of the matchups come into play, and it's something you learn while sitting in the bottom lane. Do you have any kind of like generic tips for anybody as a support player? Because you primarily play Janna, correct? I mean,
yes, I do.
Yeah, that's pretty much your go-to support. So, generic tips for an AD carry if you were playing with them that you might not see a lot of AD carries do, or you see some that do. Do you have any tips that you might want to give out to anybody?
It's a little bit tricky with Janna. I would say nowadays you have to be really careful because her trades in lane are weaker than most other supports, so you really don't want to go all in fights. What Janna really does for you is gives you great gank assist, so if people do come down, you can slow them, you can knock them up, you can knock them backwards. So that's really great, but insofar as, the 2v2, the fact that her shield now doesn't grant damage when it is broken really, really hurts her because the shield is broken relatively quick and there's suddenly 50 less damage that your carry has. So that's one thing I would tell them. The other thing is, of course, generally start boots 3 pots, so you have a little bit of sustain. Janna's not going to give you massive amounts of sustain. And buying an early Vamp Scepter really helps as well with her.
Well, absolutely. Hey, I got 2 other guys on this podcast here. Do you guys have any other questions for Sotere, maybe about bottom lane or AD carries in general?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, how are you going to have Soraka in bot lane supporting when Soraka's actually going to be a mid lane carrying?
So true. That is the rage nowadays, and she's kind of overpowered. She's ridiculous. And actually, she's banned probably more often than not at around 2k elo. Her and Lulu are just banned a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's really wild. I know we were talking about it at pretty good length a week or so ago about just how the supports don't really they're meant to scale as a support, and then when they scale with a solo lane and build an AP, it's like out of the ceiling. It's really something to say, and I don't know, I've been the victim of a couple of those pretty recently. It's pretty rough, but I guess on a more serious note, I know we've talked about some tips for the ADs, but what about some tips for the supports, and how did you come to really start playing support mostly?
I don't know what it was that really got me to playing support. At some time, like in Season 1, I decided, I'll play Sona. And I didn't really like playing Sona, but in so many games, there was like people that really didn't want to support. And I think there's still kind of this like negative impression about support players that they don't know how to play. But I always felt like if you're the one who plays support and you actually want to play support, you're bringing so much more to your team than someone who is like forced into that position and really doesn't want to be there. Because that's the worst feeling in the world, I think, is having, as an AD carry, as having a support that really doesn't want to support you and doesn't want to ward for you and doesn't really care about your protection, because it makes a world of difference. And I really think, playing a support is a lot more fun at high elo, and playing AD carry is a lot more fun because your support is generally better and will actually protect you. But as for tips, make sure your wards are up all the time. I mean, wards are so essential. People ask me, how do you carry as a support? And I did, I think twice kind of carried up mainly playing supports. And I think one of the big keys is, buy those pink wards, let your team know when they should drag. And if something good happens, like if you kill middle, or you kill one of the bottom lane and send the other one back, or you take down their jungler via counter jungling, or something along those lines, capitalize. Make sure your team knows when you should capitalize, what you should do, and give them the tools so they're able to capitalize. And that generally means, a pink ward on Dragon, a pink ward on Baron, warding all around the relevant entrances to those 2 locations so that your team is not going to be, captured and surrounded while doing those.
Fantastic insight there from a support player. I know playing in bottom lane as the AD carry that I've actually picked up a lot from my support and how to play them and where to ward and when to ward. And it's, more of asking the support player, hey, are you ready to do this? No, I need to wait for this cooldown. And by hearing that, it makes me realize, okay, if I'm ever to play, X support, I need to wait for this to be able to have this happen. It's X and Y. We need our math lander here to do math for us for all this. But, But I feel playing in the bottom lane that if you primarily play AD carry, that you can transition to support fairly well. It's a different role altogether, as you are not spending so much time on CS and everything, and you want to use your body as, I would say, a shield in some in some instances where you want to initiate ganks or try to play some footsies and whatnot, like we've talked about in the past. But my overall point is, just watching your support player play if you're in the bottom lane helps you a lot to understand how the lane works and how you can eventually go into solo queue and play support if you're forced into that role.
Yeah, certainly. And I think one thing that AD carries don't understand that supports do, and, well, some supports don't, but supports want to do, is a support really wants to take, like, a lot of the front-loaded damage, wants to take the early harassment. If you really want to get into a fight, it really behooves the support to be the one that's being targeted, because they can back off, use all their summoner spells, and then just let the AD carry go to town, and then at that point, they'll probably still want to chase the support, try to get that final blow, but supports are generally kind of sneaky to kill for one reason or another. So certainly if you see your support taking damage, they are maybe they're bad, but they also may be trying to bait the other team into attacking them. Because, the worst feeling as a support, or even as an AD carry, is bottom lane when you get into a fight and, the support just takes no damage throughout the entire fight and the AD carry dies. And that's kind of like what you certainly don't want to happen. You want to draw some aggro as support. It's like you're being a tank in any other game. Draw that aggro. Try to get them to focus you, because you're going to be tankier than your AD carry, most likely, and your AD carry can do more damage, when not being harassed.
Now, I have two questions. One is something that I know you and I have actually debated about in the past while you've been streaming, and that is, talk to me about summoner spells, because I don't think there's ever a consensus about summoner spells on supports, especially with heal getting a slight nerf recently. Use of CV, not use of CV, whether to take flash or not on certain support champions. So I wanted to get your take, because I know there's at least one that we disagree on, but I definitely want you to give your reasons for some of the things that you choose and why.
Yeah, so I think the one we disagree on is flash on Janna.
Right.
And the reason to get flash is mainly for Oracle protection, I feel. Oracle protection, and I suppose for, repositioning for ultimate, but most of the time I don't like using my ultimate, like flashing ahead of someone and then ultimating, because it kind of signals to them exactly what you're going to do, and they'll flash instantly, and then you perhaps will push them really far back. So I think that's always like a kind of a dangerous move to make. Also, I feel like if you take Exhaust instead, you can just run ahead of people and then push them back, which isn't as easily countered, because you're not really giving that little foresight with that flash ahead of time. But certainly, you're not going to be as safe if you don't have flash, but you're going to bring more to a team fight. My favorite setup nowadays with Janna is Exhaust Heal, just because with Exhaust Heal you bring a lot more to a team fight. Someone gets onto your carry and you can exhaust them and you can heal your carry as well, and it makes for better early game trades bottom lane. The one thing it does do, it makes you more susceptible to ganks, but that being said, most of the time you have everything warded up bottom lane. Now, beyond that, of course, warding is one of the most dangerous things in the game, and I really only suggest going those double summoner spells, double kind of offensive summoner spells on someone like Janna, who has like a lot of ways to get away from people with her. She has a lot of movement speed boost through Zephyr and just through her passive. She has Howling Gale to knock people away and her ultimate, whereas most other supports either have no escape, like Soraka, for instance, really doesn't have any built-in escape. She heals herself, but she can't get away very easy. Or Taric just has a single target escape through his stun, and just, he'll stun one person and run away. Certainly doesn't help if you're being chased by multiple people, whereas, Janna can get away from packs and packs of people. That being said, it is a trade-off. It is certainly dangerous to be running around with an Oracle without flash up, but you just bring more to the team fights later on, but you generally don't need flash if your positioning is proper to begin with.
I do agree with you there. There is certain things about Janna that you have more escapes and more tools to work with than most of the other supports, so that does make sense. The other thing I wanted to ask you, and this is just because of a recent change, is do you see Kale as maybe being a viable support now based off of her recent changes? The reason I ask is Her changes definitely, Divine Blessing especially, have made a certain difference where I feel like there's enough there for her to play support with a heal, with a movement. I feel she's very similar to Lulu, except for the fact that she gives, invulnerability for a certain amount of time, which I don't think there's anything better that you can ask for to keep an AD carry alive, especially in a team fight, than to have invulnerability. But, there are some other things that she does that aren't quite as useful or maybe as many tools as others, but is she viable, or could she be viable, in your opinion?
I mean, I certainly think almost everyone is viable in most roles. The game is so, well put together in that sense, and very well balanced. Like, I have a lot of people be like, oh my goodness, there's so many things that are overpowered, but really, they're not. I mean, we see a lot of diversity, a lot of variety in picks over tournaments. I don't really like her as a support champion, but I have seen it. I saw it, season 1 quite a bit as well. There were a couple people who are just like, oh, I play Kale all the time. And, it really comes down to making sure that ultimate counts. So can you do that? That's a question. Can you really make sure you get that ultimate on the right person at the right time? Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't really like her quite as much. I think Lulu brings a little bit more, has more range, can put on the slow and kind of dominate a lane better, I feel, but I haven't really seen it to a great extent. I think I've actually seen it twice in the past 2 days, and more this last week than I saw it all season 1, even though there were people that would do it back then as well. So it's picking up. And I don't know how her numbers work in so far as sustain goes versus an Alistar versus a Soraka, but I'm willing to give everything a try. But generally, people get really set in their mind who they want to support them, and if you don't go those people get mad. It's the reason to stick with the meta, so people don't troll you, and that's a good reason not to go, Kale support or Orianna support, because people will be like, well, that's not ideal, that's not who I wanted, and then they'll not play to their optimal level.
Yeah, well, try playing Nasus Soraka bottom lane in a normal and see what kind of faces you get, because I've definitely done that once or twice, and people are like, "Are you serious? Really? Nasus bottom lane? Dude, it's gonna work. I swear. Just follow me. All right. Well, I'm gonna play Riven top lane. We're not gonna have any AD carry, and that's normal Q for you.
Yep, that does happen.
But
a little too often.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you play with Trinity Force podcast. We play Nasus Soraka bottom lane.
We do our own amount of trolling, so I can't say anything. Unfortunately.
Well, I kind of want to walk into now some of the patch notes, and also Hecarim, because he came out last week, and our podcast came out right before him, and I have had a chance to play him, as well had a chance to play against him. I don't know about you guys.
I've had a chance to play against him a few times, but
yeah, I've played him and played again. Yeah,
I've not played him, but I've seen him be played quite a bit.
Played quite a bit in 2000 Elo?
At the high Elo as well, I assume.
I've seen him. I think I saw him jungle once, and then I think Hashinshin was trying to top lane him, and actually was doing pretty good against the Vladimir top lane. So that was kind of surprising, but then I didn't see him for a while after that. He was banned a couple times. It's always good to ban the new champions, because they're either going to be overpowered, or if they're not overpowered, then the people who play them are going to be weak, and they're going to be on your team, undoubtedly. So we've seen quite a bit of bans going down for him. But yeah, a little bit of play, both in the jungle and top lane.
Well, I gotta say, I'm not a top lane player, but or a giant jungler by any means, and I've played Hecarim just a little bit. I can't say I'm a big fan of him so far. I don't. I mean, I've seen him play. I've seen him carry pretty hard from both the jungle and the top lane, but just the way his abilities are, and I know Reinhardt, I had just chatted a little bit about his forehand. It just felt like his mana could have been an issue at some points, if not knowing when to use your abilities right, and I just never felt like I did damage until I got Trinity Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your Q's meant for spamming, and it's still pretty expensive and mana costly at late levels, and that can be a real issue. Not to mention his W, if you're building AD, doesn't really it's because it scales off of AP, and that's what also gives you your sustainability with the heal return for the damage dealt. And so if you're not doing a whole lot of damage because you're not building AP, you're not returning a ton of health. So the sustain there is kind of weak. And then lastly is his his passive, which is bonus AD per your movement speed for your bonus movement speed, and that's actually I think it's 10%, but it's actually kind of weak when you start doing the numbers. It really, you have to build like a ton of movement speed just to make it worth it, and it's not quite to the same level that some of the other champs get, like Vlad's passive, and I'm trying to think of some of the others, but you're just not really getting the return for building straight in, or like Galio, for instance. You're not getting that kind of return to damage for building into some other area like the movement speed.
Yeah, I feel like it's more of a trap than anything.
Oh, yeah, which is a lot what other people say. People say, well, don't build straight magic resist with Galio because you're not really getting that much damage back. It's just good to know that when you're building some magic resist, you're getting damage from it. But Vladimir's his passive's kind of OP at the moment, but yeah, it is kind of a trap to build into it. But then if it's such a trap, then the passive doesn't really work for that champion. You're missing out on some potential there.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I've seen in the games that I've played with him, or against him I should say, is I haven't played with him for anything. He feels like Vigard to me in that he needs items, and then once he has the items, then he really goes to town. But his early game seems so weak in that he can get dominated so much early that I'm not sure if you get any kind of non-passive top lane that he can't come back and be a force. And in jungle, I don't feel like he gets enough farm in the jungle to really be a force until very, very, very late game when you can get some items or he can steal some farm from certain lanes. That's the only time I've really felt like he's of any significance in a fight or any significance in a game is if you can get to a real late game with him. Well, otherwise,
his team fight presence. I was gonna say his team fight presence is great because he has the fear from his ultimate. He has the knockback from his E. It's just when you look at him, like, let's go for top lane with Hecarim, for example. If I was to play him up there, his skill set is completely around AoE. So now he's kind of like a Shyvana or a Cho'Gath in the sense where he's pushing the lane as far out as he can, and now he has to either roam or wait for the lane to come back. And that's, kind of counterproductive to what top lane will do, waiting for the ganks to go up there to really get the kills. Yes, you want to farm a lot, but top lane snowballs harder off of getting the ganks, but if you're pushing your lane out, you can't get ganks.
Mm-hmm. Right, but I also feel like, as a comparison, when you play Mordekaiser mid, you want to farm, but the kicker is that you can steal race from either your own jungle or the opposing jungle as you do it. If you're Hecarim top, you're missing out on, you can push the lane, great. You can try and go invade the jungle, but that's dangerous now that a lot more people are a lot more aware of what's going on in their jungle, where they can counter, any kind of counter ganking that might be, or counter jungling that might be found. So, and especially if you're on purple side, and where are you going to find any more farm? The only thing you can do is maybe steal golems from your own jungle, but it takes so long for him to get there, in my opinion, that once he's there, he's a real force, but it takes forever. And I think that's a huge weakness, especially for anything that might be pro-worthy at this point.
Yeah, the other thing, I haven't really seen a successful one that is built really kind of the meta golem, the really tanky DPS. All of them seem to go Trinity Force, but other kind of offensive items that make them really squishy. And it works if they're really steamrolling and if the other team doesn't have a good organization. But I just feel like, if you have organization, he still doesn't have really great defensive steroids. If he gets focused down by the attack damage carry who's unharassed or has a shield on them, then he's really going to go down really quickly.
Do you not feel will be an AD carry with no range?
Yeah. Do you feel like his team presence is worth having him in there, Sotere? Like if he was to be in the jungle with somebody who, in like middle, let's say you had middle Mordekaiser who doesn't really need blue, and he was able to take it all the time. Do you feel that he would have a place?
I don't know. I would have to see him more. I always hate to discount new champions, but I kind of feel like he's Fiora in the sense that he has a lot of damage, but he kind of has to build squishy to be most effective. So I don't know that his CC is worth it to have in a team fight just on its own, and I don't know that his disruptive presence would be enough if he builds tanky enough to survive in a team fight in an even match.
Yeah, he feels like Nocturne. If you play him in the jungle, he feels like Nocturne, but without the really great ult. You know, his ult's not as good as Nocturne's ult.
Without a fear, and Nocturne also has the defensive on his W, where he can block a spell, which is gigantic.
Right.
Any kind of gank or anything that comes out, you can block a lot with it. And Hecarim definitely doesn't have that, making him even squishier than Nocturne is in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, he feels like he has to be a glass cannon in order to really do the damage, and then at that point, well, he's also got to get in to do it, and then you got major issues at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he feels pretty balanced. I just think it's something about his kit is just lacking a little bit, and I'm not really sure what it is, other than the fact that you can't build very tanky or you'll do no damage, and you have to build glass cannon to do some damage, and then once you do that, you really don't fit anywhere. Especially if you're trying to jungle or play top lane. So it's he's kind of in a weird spot right now, but he's actually a pretty fun champion if you want to give him a try. His artwork looks really cool. The model looks really cool. And so he's fun in that sense. And you can definitely carry some games with him. But yeah, I don't know. He's just kind of in a weird spot.
I feel like he wasn't given a defensive ability really to work with. Whereas I look at, some of the other, like, for instance, if we look at major top laners, the other major top laners I feel like all have at least one defensive ability or ways to get away if need be that are really helpful for them in and around team fights and around solo fights up top. You're on an island when you're up top, and I feel like he wasn't provided a good defensive ability to really sustain him when you may get in some kind of trouble.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think the only thing he's got kind of is that his E will give you the move speed, so you can try and use that to get away if you're in a bad position during a gank. You could also use your ultimate to get away too. So both of those could work, but yeah, you would still have to take flash, and you don't have that great sustain. Your W doesn't sustain you if you're building AD, and you're not going to have it.
Yeah, I've played against one as a Lee Sin, and it was really just unfair. I just absolutely stomped him, and we had like similar item builds at one point, but I just built some defense, and he could not trade with me, and of course I wasn't going to run out of mana, and he was, and I wasn't going to run out of life, and he was going to run out of life a lot quicker than me. But the one thing that was kind of annoying about him is his ultimate apparently breaks like a lot of projectiles. For example, I had a Maokai that would come up to try to gank, and he would go in and Twisted Fate, and the guy would just ultimate away, and the Twisted Advance would be cancelled out, which is unusual because Twisted Advance kind of goes through everything.
It kind of follows them.
Yeah, we'll even grab a Vlad in Troll Pool, so you would think that it would follow him, but it did not. So that's something. It's important to know.
Oh, that is interesting to know, actually. That gives him something, I guess. But
using an ultimate to get out.
Every time you want to get out of something, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Malphite. It's like, oh man, you really shouldn't be using that ultimate to get away. But
I've been playing Malphite a lot recently. Let me tell you, it's a great escape tool when you need it. You get, especially when you get to level 18, because then you get later in the game and you feel like, okay, well, if I really need to get out of this, I can. It's not bad, but yeah, I agree with you. It's still something you don't want to waste on defense.
Right.
So does it seem that our overall impression of Hecarim is not that great? Wait and see what people come up with for him.
Yeah, and I think everyone... Go ahead.
Good.
I think everyone should, keep on trying out new champions, because they all take time to master. And, a lot of champions seem weak initially, and then they end up being relatively strong, or they get, a small tweak, and that makes them really viable. But with him, I'll play him during free week. I haven't bought him yet. I've heard from everyone that he's really fun to play, despite the fact that he's weak. So if that's kind of like your type of character, kind of like melee, bruiser, shadowy, all that sort of fun stuff, centaur-like, then
centaur-like. I'm pretty sure he is a full-on centaur.
Well, he's riding like a ghost or something like that. I don't know that it counts, but
he's dead. He's a dead centaur or an undead centaur. Yeah.
So much for centaur-like.
York dug him up.
No, there you go.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that makes sense.
Grave.
I'll say that I think he's going to need a tweak before. Otherwise, I feel like he's like down there with Xin Zhao as far as how much use he'll end up having after the newness wears off. I feel like he's, it's the same thing that I thought with, we thought with Victor was, Victor's got a nice, interesting set of skills, but they just didn't translate until he got a little bit of a buff. Now I think there's a little bit more viable, but
I still say he's secretly OP. Really, I mean, I know his Q is kind of crappy as the return time on it, but I really do think Victor could see some play here shortly. And I just feel like with as much damage as ultimate does, and if you can properly land E's, he's just such a big terror. I mean, he really does shit on like the Rise in the middle lane, which we have seen a very big resurgence of lately.
He can definitely outrange some AP carries. That's for sure. It definitely helps with his abilities.
So we'll have to see in the future what some of the the pro players come up with, the people who are playing like Sotere, who play 8 hours a day. And by the way, Sotere, I want you to go ahead and pimp your streaming per day.
Well, it's on this channel, so if you're here, just stick around till tomorrow morning. About 12 hours from now, I'll start streaming again.
Wait, what channel is that? Because we are a podcast, and people might be listening to this.
Oh, that is true. That is true. That's actually how I normally get my podcast fix. It is http://owns.tv/ggChronicle.
That was kind of awkward.
Yeah, well, I kind of got caught up on all the punctuation. I was like, what are those?
You just say own.tv/ggChronicle.
Yes.
So you mean the hypertext transfer protocol?
Yes.
That is
on the World Wide Web?
Protocol. Not the World Wide Web. It's very important to not put that in.
Is that owned with a 3 instead of the E? Is that like a leak?
That was the next thing that gave me a little of concern. I was like, should I spell out own? And I decided against it. I decided to wait long enough so it would be the equivalent amount of time had I spelled it out.
It's funny.
Look, if you're listening to us and you don't know what owned is, then you don't need to be watching the Sotere stream.
Wait, but we'd still like you.
We'd still like you to. Maybe you want to do a Google search for it. Figure it out.
Yeah, Sotere is one of the only 2100 plus ELO players that I know that will talk to you during the day, and actually, after he's played a number of games, will give back to the community and play a few games at the very end of the day with you.
Yeah, we've been playing a lot of community games, in large part because my internet has been lagging for some unknown reason. So I don't know how many I'll be doing going into the future. I do want to get that, solo queue ELO up to 3K or about there.
Of course.
Apparently the highest ELO ever had by someone was like 2856 by Gary Kasparov. So of course that's a whole different system, whole different game. But I think that's a good kind of goal to set for yourself. 2856. Okay, let's go for it.
That's right. That's right. Have you
Alex Itch is like at 2,500 right now or something. Getting there.
Have you thought about making a US?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're on the wrong realm if you want to go for the higher because so many more players are on EU West now than they are on the North American server.
Yeah, that is crazy. I mean, and yeah, the queues times do get pretty long too. So that's certainly something that will slow you down when you have to wait an hour between every game.
Now, you know what Sotere does? He leaves up his address on the stream and then goes and gets foe, so everybody can see how to walk from his house to the foe place for the hour and a half that it took him to go there, eat, and come back.
You do live in one of the best
DC
places
metro area. You don't have to walk very far.
Exactly. It is some really good
houses
food out
everywhere.
Yep, it was good.
Now, if I remember correctly, his walking distance was 1.5 miles, and it was supposed to take him 29 minutes to walk there. That's right. I studied his Google Maps.
Yeah, that is exactly correct.
It'll take about 3 minutes for the phone to come out, too.
And I was actually debating about that. I was like, I should be able to do that in about 20 minutes. But you know what? It actually took me 27 minutes. So Google Maps, pretty accurate. I had to walk through forest and through a school, which I had to slow down because I didn't want to look like a creeper for the kids.
This wasn't like school on recess where you're walking through the hands in the pockets I'm not doing anything.
Thank goodness they were not on recess, but it was a school that was in session, so I was worried. I was like, oh man, this fro is not meant to go this close to children.
I don't have any candy, stop following me.
There's nothing in the fro.
Danger.
So, last night we saw a stealth patch come out of here, and last week, again, with the Hecarim patch. So, why don't we get into some patch notes, guys?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We'll start off with the stealth nerf. This is actually a pretty interesting move on Riot's part. They release a legendary skin for a pretty popular champion in Galio, and then nerf him at the same time. So he actually got a small hit to his concussive blast, which is his Q. That's his spammable ability. It took a pretty big hit early on, or actually across the board. It's 10 damage across the board, and then a 0.1 AP magic damage scaling hit as well. So a little bit of a hit to his Q, but his Q was maybe a little bit, I don't know about overpowered, but it was pretty strong early game. It needed a little bit of a hit because it was just doing tons of damage, and that's why a lot of people are playing him. But I don't know, when Galio starts getting into late to late game, he starts becoming just an ultimate bot and not really doing a whole lot else. So it'll be interesting to see if this actually hurts Galio quite a bit and we start seeing a little bit less of him.
Yeah, Scumbag Riot release legendary skin, nerf the champion.
Yeah, really. Like, what the hell?
Well, the scumbag part is the hidden portion of it, because I certainly didn't see those patch notes anywhere until they were brought to my attention by the Trinity Force podcast crew. So thank you for that. That's why everyone should listen in every week in case there's hidden patch notes, because only we know about them.
That's right.
Or only they know about them. But, I mean, Galio is one of those champions, kind of like Rise, where you just build tank, and you're still very relevant all throughout the game. So I feel like they had to do something to him. I don't know that was the right thing to do, but...
Did you have Galio on your list? Well, you had. I don't remember. I can't remember the name of your article now.
Oh, my Nerf report.
There it is.
I don't think I did have him. I think I might have had him in the batter's box. But I mean, remember, like M5 started to use him, and Alexich, their AP carry, was kind of like strongest champions in game: Mordekaiser, Galio, Rise. I'm not sure if that was the exact order. I think that was kind of
right around the same time I started playing Mordekaiser, Galio, and Rise. That's really weird.
Yeah. No, seriously, the Trinity Force podcast, we have been on the edge of all these, what these pros have been doing. Unfortunately, we don't get enough people to watch us play, so everything we say doesn't actually come out there until the pros use it. So apparently they're listening to us.
Oh, no, I was definitely reacting to his good play. I was like, I'm going to pick these bad boys up again.
Yeah, no kidding. That's what you should do.
Yeah, it's really unfair when you can build someone so tanky and still have them do a lot of damage. I feel like the same thing with Ari. For some reason, you can get away with building like Rylai's, Woda, and then like Abyssal Scepter, and you still do tons of damage.
This all that true damage on the way back. That 10% true damage. Just overpowered.
Must be.
So, yeah, keep going in here. We had Annie, who... well, actually, did you... before I go here, Sotere, did you go through these patch notes and remove the ones that are crap?
I did not. That one's crap. So
yeah, I was going to say, because that wasn't really a... It was just more of a wording fix than it was a change. So,
right.
I'm going to let Ranhert take over the next champion, though. His favorite champion in all League.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what to say. Kali was kind of OP for a little bit, and then got nerfed, fell off a little bit. So now we're seeing a little love to her. So the base armor was increased to 20 from 17, and the base health was increased to 530 from 510. So a little bit of help for the armor and the health early on in the game. But it's nothing near what we saw the hit that she took to her passives. So I'm not really sure this is going to bring her back entirely, especially because this is really armor and health, and it's just the base. It's just a little bit, but it's something. So all Akali fans rejoice. You can now start playing her again, maybe.
Maybe. No, Gunblade's still got a nerf.
We also saw down here that Kale's Divine Blessing got a little bit of love. So the heal is actually increased. And then also get the movement speed increase. The duration is increased from the movement speed, and the mana increase has gone up, or the mana cost has gone up as well to kind of match the increase across the board for all the other things. But the heal is actually kind of relevant now, so it's giving you a little bit more of a movement speed, and it's more of a relevant heal now, healing for 60 at the first level.
Oh, sorry guys, 1 second here. We actually had a quick disconnect as John was holding this call. Alright, we're back on the call.
You there?
Yes, we're all here. John, John had to leave because he's going to be going and casting with Optimus Tom for the Cyber Sports Network, as Tom is going to be casting in front of quite a number of people, and they needed a pro to go with him. So if you guys, right after this, you guys can go watch them over at twitch.tv/Cyber Sports Network. So we were just actually talking about Kale right before this, and her heal amount has been increased across the board, starting at the lower levels from 45 to 60. And I had tried to play Kale a few weeks ago, right before the buff to come to her, and granted I was very drunk on wine, which I don't know if I should be admitting to the number of viewers that we have, but
you drinking? What?
No, it doesn't happen. I like the movement speed and movement speed duration increase on that overall. The heal is very nice, but giving that extra movement speed increase and having it last for a little longer makes her a little more viable for top lane. I know Hornet and I had a very quick, laughable discussion about her today. It lasted all of 30 seconds.
The thing I will say is that I do think Kale has she can counter certain picks. The only problem is that, especially in pro games, counter picking doesn't happen top lane very often. Top lane is one of the last ones picked, so you'll try to counter pick it, but I don't think Kale has enough presence in a team fight to really make that much of a difference. She does a lot. She can do a good bit amount of AoE damage, but it's just not enough when you get to late game for her to be viable in that role. I do think, however, that we may start to see her come back in a role for support, just as a alternative support with a lot of bans being thrown around, especially on Soraka and Janna recently. So hopefully we'll see how it goes. The one thing I will jump to is Janna, and this is a really interesting change. I did want Sotere's opinion on this, but Howling Gale changed where the longer it's channeled, her Howling Gale is her Q, which is her tornado. The longer it's channeled, meaning the longer that it sits there before you actually send it on its way, the longer it builds, the higher it throws up opponents and more damage that it does. And it's really interesting. I got to use it a couple times, and you really have to time it well. A lot of times you're still only using it to get the quick knock-up, but if you do a good planning with a good gank, it's really, really nice to have where you throw them up for a good a good split second, I should say, maybe even a second at some points, and you're holding that, the target in place for a lot longer. So it's really interesting to watch. It takes a real good bit of planning, but you could still use it other ways.
Well, I would say it's a small nerf to her, because she would knock you up no matter the distance and how long she charges her tornado for before. You would always get that same amount of stun, but now you have to, like you said, really plan it out, and you can't just toss the tornado out and spam Q really quickly and get that full, second and a half duration. Now you get significantly less from her Howling Gale.
I don't think it's that significant, though, because you still use it, and all you need is just, because a lot of times when, for instance, you're getting chased, or, your AD carry is getting chased, and you need to stop it from happening. The Howling Gale still does its point of stopping a person in place while you're still running, and that's what matters. There's a lot of instances where a good Q still does exactly what you want it to do. For instance, I used it a couple days ago. I was playing support Janna, and I hit a Q perfectly right before, because I saw Galio coming in from mid lane, coming down bot lane, coming into gank, wanted to flash ulti. I immediately threw the Q right at the right time, and it immediately stopped his ulti right in mid cast. I mean, that still, there's so many ways that the Q knocking up still matters, and I understand it's not as long as it was, but it still does its thing where it's supposed to stop somebody's movement from wherever it was.
Yeah, no, I agree. It definitely still does what it was meant to do, and that's keeping somebody in place for a very short period of time. It's just, like I said, I've always had this discussion with other people about what actually is a nerf, what constitutes a nerf. I would just say this is just a change. It just makes you have to plan it out a little bit better. It's not a nerf. It's just change.
It's a change, and like I said, it still does what it's supposed to do, but there can be a lot more planning involved for gameplay now as far as when you throw it out and how you use it.
Right. And of course, her monsoon got changed, so the knockback distance got 125 range reduced, or it's reduced by 125 distance. I don't know what the actual TMOs. I'm gonna say 125 TMOs. Actually, probably more like 7 TMOs. But anyway, the knockback distance was quite Sotere had talked about earlier in the podcast, where if you would chase somebody down, you exhaust them, get ahead of them, and pop them back. Again, it's just a change. I don't see it as really being that big of a nerf.
I don't think it is either, because I can tell you that there aren't many places in the map where if you hit the monsoon that you don't throw somebody against an object on the scale, against some geographical part of the map. There's only a few places that I can think of where you don't throw them against something. That's behind the towers in the middle of the base, and right dead in the middle of center of mid. Almost everywhere else, you end up if you throw the j in the middle, you end up throwing it again. You end up throwing somebody against the wall somewhere. So I don't think it's a big nerf. I don't think it really matters.
Well, really, Jenna Alt's just for disruption. Just get everybody off them. You have now a second, 2 seconds for everybody to reposition real quickly.
And honestly, it's not even used that often for the heal part.
No, never.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Rarely does that.
I would say those Janna changes we saw came from a lot of the pros playing her recently. We've seen a giant resurgence here. Sona, after getting her nerfs, no longer played, and Janna picked up a lot more. So I'm sure that Riot, watching Janna's resurgence getting played, realized how she needed these few changes. And people might not realize it, but they are kind of quality of life buffs for the entire team there to make her. So she's not such a giant force, but she's still someone to be reckoned with.
Well, I mean, how many pro games have we seen where the support play has actually made the difference?
And a lot. And Janna alts are huge.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I can tell you that the one thing about TSM is X Special has played exceptional especially during IPL and a couple other tournaments. And when he hasn't played that well, or he's been relegated to not being in a fight, TSM doesn't do well. I mean, it's
sure.
They try to say it's all about Reggie, but I'm telling you that X Special has played some of the best gameplay recently of anybody, and I can say that it's because of him knowing his champions, like the battle for Sona during IM Kiev, and then it's been the battle for Janna more recently. And so I know Riot's keeping tabs on it, and they're saying, well, okay, so Sonya's push was way too high early game. Now Janna's utility, amount of utility she gets from all of her abilities is almost overpowered at this point. Where, the utility to give to everybody on the team is just so good in the right hands. So I'm sure they're keeping tabs on almost everything at this point.
No, they have to be. They have to be watching, everything that is going on. Quickly running down here as we are reaching our hour standpoint, I wanted to catch just a few more quick points. And a champion that is very near and dear to Ranhert, which is Teemo, had gotten a number of quality of life buffs. And Ranhert, have you gotten to play Teemo since these changes? Maybe not.
Maybe.
I'm going to assume that he has. As he's
here I am. Sorry.
Yes.
I was talking, it didn't come up with you. No, I have not played them. I wanted to, but no one will let me play them.
Really, I was going to say they fixed the toxic shot because it was doing less damage with higher attack speeds. What was it? It was every time you attacked, it would just reset the timer on which it ticked.
Yeah, every time you attacked, it would reset the timer. So if you had enough attack speed, which is what you want to build on Teemo, then every time it would reset the timer and you wouldn't get the tick of poison. So they fixed that now. So it's
now you're always getting the tick.
Yeah.
Yes, and move quick, getting its cooldown reduced from 17 seconds to 22 seems like a huge buff for him. Because Teemo is already squishy as it is, so having that extra 5 seconds to be able to to have it recharge and get the hell out of there, to me seems like a Teemo. Just all these changes to Teemo. Also, they fixed a bug where the Noxus traps recharge time, which are his eggs or mushrooms. They wouldn't update with new ranks or like cooldown reduction until reaching full ammo charges, so you couldn't really tell when you had a mushroom up very easily. But now that they changed them, there's just a bunch of quality of life buffs that Teemo really needed. Obviously, Toxic Shock being the big one. I'm sure Rain Man is just very happy right now.
Well,
I was thinking the same thing.
They're really like
They're going to turn into a giant ravenous rabbit that's like super tanky.
Hard carry everything now, and you can still hide in the bush.
Red buff, Phage, Spirit Visage. That's all Raidman needs to carry.
Nobody poops out little wards better than Timo.
No, nobody does. That's absolutely right.
So if you can find a viable way to play him where you get to ward all over the map and know where everybody is, I mean,
More power to you.
You can have some more presence in team fights. It can be game over. It can be Timo all the time. See him banned.
So, moving on very quickly over to the very last things I want to talk about, were the Atmos Impaler nerf from 1.5%, or sorry, 2% to 1.5%. I haven't built Atmos Impaler in a very long time, but that just feels like a giant nerf to me.
I haven't either, and this is mostly because I haven't been playing the right champions to have him on. But I do agree with you. It feels like a giant nerf. I'm just not sure exactly where it's going to fit. Because there was certain top champions that you were building Atlas on, and this was after building Warmogs.
And this is the second. This is the second Atmos Impaler in 3 patches. I think we've had 3 patches now, where 2 of them it's been nerfed. Because there was a nerf a few patches ago where they changed how much it did. Wasn't it like 2.5 or 3% before?
I'm not sure. I remember them reducing Warmogs, but I'm not.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So I mean, the combo. I think they've been looking at and saying, well, this combo keeps getting built. Why does it keep getting built? Well, the reason being is because once you put them together, once you have the Warmogs to build the health, and then the Atmos to turn into damage from it, it was a sick combo, and it was, you know, making a tanky champion into a DPS nightmare. So, you know, the champions that you always see it built on, you know, the Aurelias, the Shyvanas, there's some others, but it's not. Real quickly, it feels significant. I just not sure because I haven't played it yet or tested it yet or seen anybody really test it yet, and whether it just brought it more in line with everything else or not.
Right. We'll have to see how more people. I haven't really seen it built in a while, especially after the Warmogs nerf. And I know I haven't built it. Right. Yeah. And Frozen Mallet gives you that passive of the slow, so why not build it on life and slow rather than crit and damage? I'd rather have the Frozen Mallet.
As I say, that leads to another little change that I wanted to talk about, and that's Wit's End costing 150 more gold total than it did before. And I think the reason this nerf came about is because we're seeing a lot more double AP combos, especially from versatile champions like a Cannon who can play top or mid, or a Vlad who can play top or mid, or a Mordekaiser. And when he had a double AP, the Wit's End was such a fantastic combination for champions of magic resistance and attack speed that it was so great to build, especially on an Udyr or a Shyvana. And I think they finally saw that, okay, everybody's building these for a reason. We need to bring this more in line because it's such a for the cost, for the amount that it costs for 2,000 gold, you could immediately have more attack speed and magic resistance to keep you sustained in a team fight. When we started to see more double APs. So.
Oh yeah, giving that debuff to everybody, stacking double Wotus so nobody dies, and then everyone just doing disgusting magic damage.
Yep.
You need to nerf it.
Absolutely. You need to live through it. It's definitely an interesting little change they made, but I like it. I think it makes sense.
I see someone's cursor sitting over here by the HP mana regen. Which one is that? Is that
that would be Ranhert.
Ranhert, sir? Once again, his mic is muted and he's talking into it.
I was clicking around. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, okay. He didn't want to talk about it.
I do not want to talk about it. My cursor has to be somewhere, damn it.
You need to put out the stuff we've already talked about. For those who don't know, we have a Google document where we write everything down that we want to talk about. We share it between each other each week. It's a great way to stay organized. So if you guys have pull the curtain back. So if you guys have a podcast or something you're doing, definitely look in the Google Docs. It's fantastic. It's been a great way to keep us organized. So, on top of all the UI changes and everything, Doran's Blade and Doran's Ring got a slight nerf of 20 health, and it kind of eliminates the whole stacking of it. Every time you lose 60 life if you stack 3 of them, and I haven't seen a giant nerf for it. I don't really stack 3 of them. but I'm never really that far behind in my lane. I mean, it takes a special person to be able to put me in. I'm sure if I went and played at 2100 elo, that person would do it for me. But playing around 14 to 1600, I haven't seen the big nerfs out of it. But just another reason to stop people from stacking them all together. That's just another nerf out of it. So
yeah, I was gonna say the early stack gave you such an advantage for sustain in lane. Whether it was mid or bottom, there were just certain times where like, okay, well I can get 3 rings or I can get 3 blades, and I can sustain in any lane I'm in. Might as well stick with it.
Right. I'll always build at least 2 of them together in bottom lane, no matter what. Even after the nerf, I still build 2 because I like that extra attack damage that it's giving, and the 20 attack damage on 2 of them. So. All together, this patch, I really like what the patch has brought. I guess my favorite out of the patch isn't Hecarim. It's the floating combat text change. That has been my favorite, absolute favorite change of this whole entire patch.